I'm Vanessa Binks, and today's Stock Journal panel discussion is focusing on the sheep and wool industry. Today I have three esteemed panel members with me. If you would like to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your role in the industry.
Stephen Reid from Michelle Wool, based here in Adelaide. I'm the CEO of the operation. The company's a wool marketer, broker, buyer, processor and exporter with a factory here in Adelaide and one in China as well.
Yeah, Jeff Power, I'm a grazier east of Orroroo in the north of South Australia. I'm presently President of Livestock SA. I've also been Chair of Wool Producers Australia, which is the national peak council body.
Alan Piggott from the Mallee, also a member of Livestock SA, and through that I had the opportunity to be Chair of the South Australian Sheep Industry Blueprint Working Group, which is looking at growing our sheep industry here in South Australia over the next few years. And I'm also Vice President of the Sheep Meat Council of Australia.
Thank you. Well, it's good to have you here. And firstly, we'll just start with yourself. Where do you see the sheep, lamb and wool prices heading in the next 6 months?
Well, probably sheep and lamb's a bit hard to talk about. That's not my expertise, but certainly from a wool perspective, we're at an interesting point. We've seen record prices for fine wool in particular, medium merinos and cardings. And they've been sustained for a year and a half in 95 percentile pricing. Crossbreds have actually collapsed and their pricing is at lower quartile. So it's a bit of a cusp at the moment, but a couple of fundamentals we do know is production's increasing very slowly in the world from a low base. Production capacity exceeds supply of wool, and global demand wool goes to middle income earning people around the world, consumers, and there's more of them particularly in Asia and other parts of the world growing. So the fundamentals are pretty good, but we're at record prices right now.
Jeff, anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, look, from a producer's point of view, we've seen sustained growth over the last few years. The wool industry has been very good to us. And, you know, in my time, and I've got the greyest hair amongst the panel here, I don't think that I've seen wool, sheep and beef prices as good as what they are now. Yeah, I think we're on a real upward curve.
And certainly from the sheep meat perspective, lamb and mutton, the next 6 months we go into, increased supply, so prices do fall a little bit. But having said that, over the last 3 years we've seen the lows that come through with the spring flush not being as low every time, they're just getting a little bit higher, so that's very positive for the industry. So both mutton and lamb have been through record prices over the last 6 months. It will ease a little bit, but come next year we think things will be going really well again.
Do you think buyers are becoming more cautious?
I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think consumers are becoming more astute, more demanding perhaps about the product that they're getting. So I think we all need to focus on that consumer being front and centre and making sure that we're meeting their expectations. And as those expectations change, we all have to change.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, animal welfare is at the forefront of all decision making on farm. As Alan said, the consumer is pretty savvy these days. He knows what he wants, or they know what they want, so we've got to produce a product ethically to suit that market.
From a textile point of view, there's no doubt that people are nervous about buying through the supply chain, and it's just-in-time business now. So there is, I guess, consumers being a bit more savvy. Fashion companies, and wool mostly goes into fashion, are leaving their decisions at a very, very last moment, which flows all the way through the pipeline. And ultimately, that leaves the growers and early stage processors like Michelle's making decisions just in time, which brings about volatility. It's not necessarily depressing prices. As I said, wool prices are very, very good, other than crossbreds, but there is more volatility and there's more risk.
How can producers position themselves in a market that's like that?
I think we've got to position ourselves. We've got to have good on-farm biosecurity. We've got to be able to produce a product that we know the consumer wants. And as I said, we've got to do this ethically and sustainably. Yeah.
And certainly in the same vein, there's no doubt that producers can watch what the market's after, what our consumers are after, and we need to meet their expectations.
So the high prices that we are getting at the moment, what flow-on effects has that had for producers and the wider industry?
It's been a great opportunity to improve infrastructure. I've bought sheep handling equipment that I probably wouldn't have bought. We've certainly upgraded our wool shed. We've had a fairly stringent fencing program, and we've been able to upgrade our waters and increase our waters. So, yeah, that's that's good for the economy. That's creating employment right down the chain.
Yeah, we're certainly going through golden days at the moment, so the astute farmers that have been in the game for a long time know that we do go through a bit of a cycle, highs and lows, so you really need to make hay while the sun shines. So now is the time to be investing in that infrastructure, perhaps expanding the business. There are a lot of labour-saving devices. One of the issues with sheep industry is there's a perception that it's hard work. That's not necessarily the case. There are a lot of good gear out there that makes the job a lot easier, and you know, while they're actually making a good profit, it's time to invest back into it, and also investment in genetics and things like that. It's a great opportunity to actually strengthen your industry.
You just spoke about making the industry easier to work in, so technology would probably play a big role in that. What type of technology is available at the moment for producers that you think's really playing a big role?
Well, there's a different range. I suppose on farm we are looking at the opportunities for, you know, electronic tags, auto drafters and all those things. So there's plenty of technology on farm that can make the job a lot easier. Sheep handlers as well. It's interesting, this morning I hosted a ram maintenance day. We were actually trimming feet of rams, and some of these rams are 120, 140 kilos, but we've got a machine that actually turns them upside down and makes the job a lot easier. So that is very important for our industry. I think from an industry perspective, we're seeing some exciting developments in objective carcass measurement. Our processors are going down that path, and through Livestock Data Link, our producers are going to get information on the lambs that are being sent to slaughter. So I think it's a great opportunity to actually get good feedback, which is important for our producers if they're going to develop their product for the customer or the consumer, as I mentioned earlier. We need that feedback, which is so important.
It's an interesting point you bring up, that the better prices and good demand for wool on farm has allowed people to invest in innovation, but it's happening through the supply chain as well. You know, certainly when wool's in demand, the price goes up. We found our factories particularly busy, albeit just in time, and it's given us a chance to use some of the new technology, digital technology, to simplify the transfer of ownership from growers to ourselves, also from ourselves through the plant to our customers. So it is quite interesting to see how new technology can change not just the process of production, but also the commercial processes all through the supply chain.
Yeah, look, from a pastoral point of view, I've actually just come back from Oodnadatta, and one property I went over there, they've got probably about 60 points where they're using a telemetry system through a tower and a UHF system. So telemetry is going to play a huge part. Also, you're going to see the use of drones. So, you know, you're going to see some big changes in the next 10 years. If you look back 10 years and you look at today and look at another 10 years forward, you know, the change is really noticeable.
All right, so just long-term outlook for Australia's, we'll start with the wool industry.
For sure. I think I touched on it before, but it's the middle class or the towards affluent consumer who buys wool products typically. There's also military and corporate wear, but let's say it's a fashion product, particularly on the finer end. There are more people that fit that profile in the world now than there ever was, and the number is increasing dramatically, primarily around China, but also what we're seeing in India and other countries. So demand for wool at a consumer level will increase. Production is not going to increase dramatically, in my opinion, and it'll be interesting to get the view of the other two gents in a moment. So I think in the longer term, it's a very, very positive outlook. The negatives are we do have quite a strong footprint in China. 75% of our wool goes there. Half of it stays, so they're the biggest single consumer in the world. The other half feeds the rest of the world for consumer products. So there is a bit of a sovereign risk issue there. But if you look over the broader picture in the longer term, it's more demand than supply.
It's a similar thing for red meat, and I'll let Alan make mention of that in a minute. You know, we've got this newfound wealth in Asia. Primarily, they might have lived on rice 15 or 20 years ago. Now they've got the taste of red meat, and they love it, because we have students come out from Hong Kong every year, and in conjunction with Michelle and AWI, we've been doing that for 10 years. And when they first came out, we were told we had to watch their diet. And anyway, we threw a few chops around, and they left the rice and they ate the chops. And so now we don't even worry about the rice. They look forward. The word gets back there that they're going to get a good feed of red meat when they come out, and they love it. And I think we're gradually getting the word into Asia that we've got some really clean green product out here as far as red meat goes. I think we're doing a good job as far as export goes, and export being our main market. Our domestic market is our value add. So I see, with this newfound wealth in Asia, I see a really good time for the red meat industry.
Look, I think the world is our oyster when it comes to our sheep industry here in Australia. You know, we're at record low sheep numbers in Australia, which means there's fantastic demand for our product. I've just returned from a trip overseas, and there's no doubt that our product is held in very high esteem. We have experts all through the value chain here in Australia. It's something we probably do better than most countries in the world, from producer, processor, through the whole works. It's absolutely fantastic to see when you go overseas. So I think there's a lot of upside. Probably our biggest challenge at the moment is the lack of numbers. We're having processing plants that are struggling to find stock. We don't want them shutting their doors, because when we do crank the numbers up, then it's going to be hard to get that processing happening. But I think the other thing that really excites me about the industry is the number of young people that are coming on board. It's just absolutely fantastic when you go to workshops and field days, and they're really excited about the industry. And it's not just actually farming the sheep. There are so many allied industries that people can get involved with. So I think it's looking very positive at the moment, so it's great to see.
Well, thank you. I think we can leave it there, and thank you for sharing your views and your future outlooks on the industry.